Hi everybody and welcome to another Real Rugby video this week. Today I am picking my ultimate Rugby World Cup dream team made up of players who have actually won the Rugby World Cup since its inception in 1987. So I'll only be looking at players that have actually won the Rugby World Cup, so 9 teams in total. I'll give you my opinion on who I think some of the better players were in each position and who ultimately I selected and why. So I know this is a very subjective topic. If you have a different opinion from mine, I'd love to debate about these sort of things. Leave your comments in the comment section below and let me know what you think of my ultimate Rugby World Cup dream team. Before I get going, if you haven't done so yet, please click on the subscribe button. Also click the little bell notification at the bottom of this video to get notifications of when we upload new and exciting content every single week. So let's get into it. I'm looking at fullback first, so we'll work backwards from fullback. From 1987, we've got John Gallagher, and then Marty Roebuck, Andre Hubert, Matt Burke, Josh Lucy, Percy Montgomery, Israel Dagg, Ben Smith, and Willie LaRue in 2019. So those are the 9 fullbacks that have won Rugby World Cup since 1987. And immediately the couple of names that sort of jump out at me that I think would be part of my shortlist is John Gallagher, Andre Hubert, Matt Burke, Josh Lucy, Percy Montgomery, Israel Dagg, and Ben Smith. All fantastic players, wonderful players, and deserved World Cup winners. For me, I'm going to go with Matt Burke. I think I'm a little bit biased here. I think between Christian Cullen, Serge Blanco, and Matt Burke, they're probably the 3 greatest fullbacks that I've seen play rugby. And I'm just a huge Matt Burke fan. I think he was a very, very classy fullback. He did have his off days. I remember a test in Perth against the Boks in 1998. He missed a couple of kicks and we won by 1 point. So he did have his off days, but when he was on song, he was a fantastic attacking, counter-attacking fullback, a very, very solid kicking game. He could chip and chase. He was solid under the high ball and just one of those all-round classy players. I think notable call-outs here is John Gallagher in 87, who before Glenn Osborne and Christian Cullen was that counter-attacking running fullback. He really revolutionized the game in the late 80s, and I think it was a big loss when he went to play rugby league. Andre Hubert was very, very good. Israel Dagg and Ben Smith in 2011 and 2015 was very, very good, but I'm going to stick with my bias. I'm going to go with Matt Burke on this one. So we've got Matt Burke at 15. On the right wing, the eligible players are John Kirwan, Bob Egerton, anybody remember him from 1991? James Small, Ben Tune, Jason Robinson, JP Peterson, Corey Jane, Nehe Milner-Skudder, and Cheslin Colby. My shortlist out of right wings are Colby, Jason Robinson, and John Kirwan. Those are the 3 that really stand out, although I have to say James Small and Ben Tune were fantastic players in their heyday. But out of this list, that is sort of my short list. I think Colby's career is still in its infancy, as good as he was over the last 2 years, and everybody's seen the impact that he made to the Springbok side. I would probably go between Robinson and John Kirwan. And purely for the longevity of his career and the amount of tries that he scored, I definitely have to go with Kirwan on this one. John Kirwan is one of my favorite players. There's been so many fantastic wings over the years. If you think of Lamu, Jeff Wilson, David Campese, Jason Robinson himself, Ray Mort in the 80s for South Africa was, a similar type of player to John Kirwan. But out of World Cup winners, I have to go with Kirwan. And if you want to understand why, just look at that try that he scored against Italy in the 1987 World Cup. He scored another one in the final, which was a fantastic finish by him. And he was just a magnificent player. So I'm going with John Kirwan on the right wing to give us some explosive power on attack out wide. At outside centre, we've got Warwick Taylor, Jason Little, Yapi Mulder, Dan Herbert, Will Greenwood, Jacques Fourie, Conrad Smith, and Lucanio Am. Again, a couple of really classy players that stand out to me is Jason Little, who together with Tim Horan was one of the best centre partnerships in the 90s. Will Greenwood, who I think was a very cagey outside centre, very solid on defence, very similar to Jacques Fourie, who was also defensively a very, very good organizer, although he could attack, better than most outside centres. But I have to go in this instance with double World Cup winner Conrad Smith. He was sort of the consistency in the backline that the All Blacks that made the All Blacks very successful between 2010 and 2015, and he's a deserved double World Cup winner. he'll go down as one of the greatest All Black backline players of all time. And I'm going to go with Conrad Smith at outside centre. At 12, we've got a pick between Joe Stanley, Tim Horan, Henny LaRue, Mike Tyndall, Francois Steyn, Ma'a Nonu, and Damien de Allende. And again, a couple of real legends here. Nonu is a double World Cup winner. Tim Horan's a double World Cup winner. Frans Steyn is a double World Cup winner, although he didn't really feature in 2019 all that much. And then Tyndall, was solid as a rock in the England backline. But I've got to go with Timmy Horan here. I've always said that if I pick my all-time greatest centre pairing, it'll be Tim Horan and Donny Gerber. So personally, there's no way that I can't pick Tim Horan. He was very, very good in 91. That Wallaby side was exceptional. They attacked very, very well. And Horan and Little were fantastic in that midfield pairing. But he was even better in 1999. I remember that he was very, very sick the week before the semi-final against South Africa. And he just tore us to pieces. He played one of his best games that I've ever seen him play. So Tim Horan, not just in a World Cup dream team, he'll probably make my all-time rugby dream team. So he's a fantastic player. And together with Smith, I think they'll be very good. On the left wing, I'm picking between Craig Green, David Campese, Chester Williams, Joe Roth, Ben Cohen, Brian Abana, Richard Kahui, Julian Sevilla, and Makazole Mapimpi. Campo was fantastic, one of my favorite players of all time, an attacking genius. He wasn't strong in defense, but I know of another genius in South Africa that wasn't strong in defense, and he was fantastic. So Campo was fantastic. Joe Roth on his day was really, really good. Ben Cohen on the left wing for England was that physical, big type of winger that scored a lot of tries. So we all know how dangerous Julian Sevilla was, but for me, really, if you've got the brute power and pace of John Kirwan on the right wing, I'd complement that with the flair of somebody like Brian Abana on the left wing. Habana is a legend. I think he's the greatest wing that South Africa ever produced. He holds the record number of tries, played well over 100 tests. He's one of the most humble guys and one of the hardest workers in any team that he's played for. And in every single team that he played for, he was successful. So it's a testament to the player that he is. And out of that list, I'd happily pick Brian Abana any day of the week. Right, at fly-off was a little bit tricky because there's so many legends that played in World Cups and actually won World Cups. We've got Grant Fox, Michael Liner, Joel Stransky, Stephen Larkham, Johnny Wilkinson, Butch James, Aaron Cruden, Dan Carter, and Andre Pollard. So immediately the names that stand out are Fox, Liner, Larkham, Wilkinson, and Carter. But it really came down to two players for me. It's got to be between the two left footers, between Johnny and Carter. And it was really, really tough to pick. I think in a World Cup context, I would probably go with Wilkinson because of the impact that he had on the English side in 2003. If they didn't have Wilkinson at fly-off, there's a question mark on would they have won the World Cup in 2003. That is how big his impact to that team was. But I've got to go with Dan Carter purely because I think he is the greatest fly-off that's ever played the game. And I'm looking for somebody to unlock the attacking brilliance of this backline. And I think he's a better distributor of the ball and he's a better reader of the game than Wilkinson was. So he can kick the points. He can get you into the right field position with his left boot. He's defensively strong. And I think Dan Carter is the perfect fly-off for this backline. So who's going to get the backline going? At scrum-half, we've got David Kirk, Nick Farr-Jones, Joost van der Westhuizen, and George Gregan, Matt Dawson, Farida Priya, Perry Wipu, Aaron Smith, and Faf de Klerk. Again, an exceptionally difficult choice to make because there's so many legends. From Australia, you've got Farr-Jones and Gregan, two legends of the game, probably the two greatest scrum-halves that has ever played for Australia. For South Africa, you've got Van der Westhuizen and de Priya. There's very little to pick between the two. Matt Dawson, probably the greatest English scrum-half of all time, and Aaron Smith, who I regard as one of the three best All Black scrum-halves of all time. So a very, very difficult choice to make. It came down for me between Farida Priya and Joost. I don't think it's fair to always compare the two players. They both played for the Bulls. Joost's career ended in 2003. Farida Priya's started in 2004. So they really their careers followed, one after the other. But I don't think it's fair to compare them because Fourie de Pre was technically a better scrum-half, and his tactical awareness was a lot better than Joost. But Joost, I think, had a lot more heart, and his passion and his instinctive play sort of made him a different type of scrum-half. I'm biased again. I think a lot of people will go with Fourie de Pre. I'm going with Joost. I think in a World Cup, he's just magic. He played in 3. He won 1 in 1995. I think he's the greatest scrum-half that's ever played the game. A lot of people in Wales will argue with me. But again, I'm South African, so I'm biased. I'd pick Joost to play alongside Dan Carter. I think that is the ultimate dream combination at halfback. Right, into the forwards. So who are the guys that's going to secure the ball for this back line? At number 8, we've got Buck Shelford, Troy Coker, Mark Andrews, Tutai Kefu, Lawrence Dallaglio, Donnie Rousseau, Kieran Reid, and Dwayne Vermeulen. My short list out of that list of names is Buck Shelford, who's just an All Black legend, Kefu, Dallaglio, Reid, and Vermeulen. I would have loved to pick Lawrence Dallaglio because I think from the base of the scrum he gets you a lot of go forward ball. He was a good line out option. He was very, very solid on defense, and he brought that physicality to the pack that really made England a force in 2003. But I've got to go with Kieran Reid on this one. Two-time World Cup winner, All Black captain, over 100 tests. There's very little that he hasn't accomplished in his long and distinguished career. At his peak, around 2012, probably between 2010 and 2013, but I think in 2013 he was at his peak, and I've never seen a number 8 play as well as he did that year. So tough not to pick somebody like Dwayne Vermeulen, but I've got to go with Kieran Reid on this one. Right, the flankers at number 7, we've got Michael Jones, Willie Ofahengawe, Ruben Creer, David Wilson, Neil Back, Jean Smith, Richie McCaw, and Pieter-Steph du Toit. An honourable mention for all 3 South Africans. I'm a huge Ruben Creer fan. I think he was one of the best flankers that ever played for the Springboks. Highly, highly underrated. Jean Smith in 2007 was arguably the Springboks' best player at the World Cup. He had a fantastic World Cup in 2007. And Pieter-Steph du Toit has just been named World Rugby Player of the Year. So very difficult not to pick any one of those players. Michael Jones is another standout. Everybody knows how good he is. But in a World Cup context, I've got to go with Richie McCaw again. Double World Cup winner as captain. I think he only lost something like 17 tests in his entire career. One of the greatest All Blacks of all time. I think he'll go down with the likes of Colin Meads and Jonah Lomu as one of the greatest All Blacks. And I have to pick him at number 7 for my ultimate World Cup dream team. To play next to Richie McCaw, we've got a pick out of Alan Wetton, Simon Poitevin, Francois Pinard, Matt Cobain, Richard Hill, Skalkberger, Jerome Kaino, and Sia Kolisi. Again, a couple of fantastic names in that group of players. I think the standout ones here are Richard Hill, who was a fantastic player for England. I really rated him. I thought he was a fantastic player. Skalkberger, obviously hard as a rock, talisman of the South African rugby team over the last couple of years. But again, if you pick Kieran Reid at 8, Richie McCaw at 7, you've got to go with another double World Cup winner in Jerome Kaino at number 6. I think he made a big difference in that semi-final in 2015 against the Boks. He was probably the difference between winning and losing between him and Carter. He brings a lot of physicality into that loose trio, and I think with Kieran Reid and Richie McCaw, that combination, we've got to keep that intact. So I'm going to go with Jerome Kaino at 6. The lock pairing at number 5, we're looking at Gary Wetton, John Eales, Hannes Strydom, Ben Kay, Victor Matfield, Sam Whitelock, and Louis de Jager. And the names that stand out, obviously John Eales, double World Cup winner, was the captain in 1999. One of the greatest players of all time. Another double World Cup winner in Sam Whitelock. But I've got to go with Big Vic on this one. Victor Matfield was the player of the match in the 2007 final. I think he's one of the ultimate rugby players of all time. He had athleticism that a lot of locks didn't have, and a skill set that a lot of locks didn't have. He was supreme in the set piece. He hardly ever lost a line-out ball, and everybody knows how good he was at stealing opposition balls. So I've got to go with Victor Matfield here. I think he's one of the greatest locks that has ever played the game. Next to him, because Victor was that type of athletic type of player, I went with somebody that brought a lot of physicality. I had to pick from Murray Pierce, Rod McCall, Cobus Wiese, David Giffen, Martin Johnson, Bucky's Buerta, Brad Thorne, Brody Retallick, and Eben Etzebeth. The short list for me out of this list is Etzebeth, Retallick, Buerta, and Johnson. I think those are the 4 standout players in this selection. It's difficult not to pick Bucky's next to Victor because they were such a good combination, but I've got to pick Martin Johnson. As a South African, it's very difficult to pick him, but he was such a fantastic player and captain for England. And like Wilkinson, I don't think England would have been that good if he wasn't the captain. I don't think they would have won the World Cup if he wasn't the captain of that team. And he was very, very physical, so that might allow Victor to play his more normal game, which is a little bit looser. So happy to go with Martin Johnson. Notable call out here obviously is Brody Retallick, which I think is a fantastic player. Right, into the front row. At tight head, we've got John Drake, Ewan McKenzie, Barley Swart, Andrew Blades, Phil Vickery, CJ van der Linde, Owen Franks, and Frans Malherbe. Not a lot to pick from, to be honest. If I compare this to some of the other positions, I mean, all these guys won World Cups, so they're legends in their own rights. But the 3 standouts really for me are Ewan McKenzie, Phil Vickery, and Owen Franks. And I think this was an easier pick. I went with Owen Franks, who's a double World Cup winner in 2011 and 2015. Played over 100 tests for New Zealand. I think he was very unlucky not to make the cut for last year's tournament, but he will be remembered as one of the greatest tight heads to ever play for New Zealand. So happy for Owen Franks to anchor the scrum on the tight head side. At Loosehead, we've got Steve McDowell, Tony Daly, Os Durant, Richard Harry, Trevor Woodman, Tony Woodcock, Joe Moody, and the Beast. Tony Woodcock and Beast and Tawarira deserve honorable mentions here because they've got fantastic careers behind them. Both played over 100 tests and they're both World Cup winners. But I've got to go with Os. I mean, it's just, for me, it's a no-brainer. Double World Cup winner, made a comeback after being out of the game for 2 to 3 seasons. He was a dynamic player who could tackle, he could run, he could pass. He was solid in the scrums, and he will be remembered in South Africa at least as one of the greatest players ever. Personally, I think he's the greatest loosehead that has ever played the game. So I'm very comfortable at picking Os. Okay, then at hooker, we've got a pick between Sean Fitzpatrick, Phil Kearns, Chris Rousseau, Michael Foley, Steve Thompson, John Smith, Kevin Mialamu, Dane Coles, and Bongi Mnambi. The names that stand out of that group is Fitzpatrick, Kearns, Smith, Mialamu, and Coles. I think between Kearns, Smith, and Fitzpatrick, there's not a lot to pick. I've got to go with Fitzy on this one. Very difficult for a South African to pick Sean Fitzpatrick. He's one of those players that we love to hate when he was playing, but a fantastic player and a superb captain for the All Blacks. Won the first ever Rugby World Cup, and I think between Durant and Franks, they'll make up a solid front row. So I'm going to go with Fitzpatrick at hooker. So just to recap, this is my Rugby World Cup Ultimate Dream Team. We've got at fullback Matt Burke. On the wings, we've got John Kerwin and Brian Abana. In the centres, we've got Conrad Smith and Timmy Horan. The halfback pairing, Dan Carter and Joos van der Westhuizen. Our loose trio is Kieran Reid, Richie McCaw, Jerome Kaino. Our lock pairing is Victor Matfield, Martin Johnson. And the front row is Owen Franks, Sean Fitzpatrick, and Os Durant. If I had to pick a coach to coach this team, a lot of people would probably say Steve Hansen. I've got to go with Rassie Erasmus, purely because Rassie took a team ranked number 6 or 7 in the world and really built them up over 12 to 18 months and turned them into world champions. So I think if you give Rassie a team full of talent like this, there's going to be magic coming out of that team. In terms of just a couple of stats, from 1987, I've picked 2 players. From 1991, I picked 1. From 1995, I picked 2. From 1999, I picked 2. 2003, I've only picked 1. From 2007, I picked 3. From 2011, I picked 5. And from 2015, I picked 6, with no representation from the recent World Cup winning South African team from 2019. Obviously, there are some overlaps, specifically between the 2011 and 2015 All Black sides. So, I'm taking into account that there's some double World Cup winners in this team. So New Zealand is contributing 8 players to this team. South Africa 4, Australia 2, and England 1. So I can't be blamed for any sort of South African bias. There's more New Zealanders in there. They've only won the World Cup 3 times, and South Africa's won it 3 times, with 2 Aussies and 1 Englishman in that team. Captain for this team, I probably have to go with Richie McCaw if I've got to pick somebody out of this team. So that's it, guys. That is my ultimate Rugby World Cup dream team. Leave your comments below. Let me know what you think of this team and who would you pick as your 15.